You're listening to the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, where we do fast, fun, free daily deep dives into books of the Bible. And right now, we're going through Esther.
Have you ever thought about what it would be like to conquer the whole world? I mean, what a rush that would be, right? Look, I don't want to hurt anybody. I just want to imagine a version of conquering the whole world where it's nice. It's like paintball or something, and everybody's just really honest. And when they get hit, they raise their hands and they're like, I'm out, and that's it. Nobody has to die in this world conquest. It's a rather nice one. But you sit around, you think about what it would be like to conquer the world, and you win all of these fights and everything. I mean, what happens after you win? You get everybody else's cities. You get all their stuff. I guess it's just yours now after you conquer the world. Do you have to inventory that? I guess you got to get a whole bunch of people and sign them up and do like W-2s for them and stuff, and benefit packages so you can get them to work as fast as possible. Be like, here's a clipboard or spreadsheet or something, a little tablet. Just start walking around and seeing what we got here and type it in. Like, I don't know what kind of stuff I'd want you to look for now that we've conquered the world and see what our new holdings are. But I guess we'd want to start with like towns and cities. See how many of those we got now. And I don't know, but probably like weapons and other things of value too, like musical instruments, savings. See if they got any banks. Do we have all their money now? What do we do with all of their money? Do we just keep using all the money that all the different things that we conquered we're using, or do we make new money? What about the roads? Who's going to take care of those? How do we join them all together? That's going to be tricky. We're going to have to figure out how we do that and what the rules are going to be. Yeah, we're going to need somebody to go and track down what all the local laws are for everybody, because we don't want a kind of thing where we conquered the whole world, and if you're standing in this place and you do a thing, it's great and everybody's happy, but you cross this little line 10 feet to the right over here, and now all of a sudden you got to go to prison for what you did. We got to figure out what the laws are and take an inventory of that. Like, the point is, I think it would be very taxing to conquer the whole world, and maybe the conquering part wouldn't even be the hard part. I think the administrative nightmare you'd have on your hands after you got it done would be the real pain in the butt. And that is what Cyrus the Great was up against in 539 BC, after he got done conquering most of what he would have been interested in conquering. He knocked off the big empire on the block. He got rid of Babylon. And you'll recall, Babylon, under the leadership of their young buck stud king Nebuchadnezzar, they're the ones who knocked off the previous big bully on the block. That was Assyria. And all of that stuff had happened really fast from the late 600s BC up until about 540 BC. So we're talking like 65 years. So like, as I'm recording this, like since the 1960s, everything got changed up. And now here you come along, Cyrus the Great. You win a few battles, play your cards right on a few things, and you are the inheritor of culture, like all of culture and the world. And so there's a lot for Cyrus to think about. The biggest thing that we're interested in terms of the administrative decision-making before Cyrus is that question of what are you going to do with the Jewish people? Because you and I, as we're working through the Bible, we're following this through line of all of these promises from God to redeem through these people. And there's a lot of loose ends there. Things are not in a good position politically at the time that Cyrus arrives on the scene for that redemption to occur. You know, all the people who carry the promise with them are slaves. They're in bondage and captivity in some faraway land, and the temple is shut down. God doesn't seem to live among his people anymore, at least not the way he did. Things are really amiss. So, okay, Cyrus, we know you got a lot to do, and it's really interesting, and we care about all of that stuff, but let's just get to the Jewish thing. What are you going to do with the Jewish people? How are you going to solve that thing? Are you going to act like the Assyrians before you, the Babylonians before you? Or are you going to maybe make some political moves that would get things back on track for the redemptive plan that we're really excited about? And as we read through the Bible, we're delighted to discover that the answer is the latter. Cyrus decides he's going to let the Jewish people go back home. And it looks like he decides this pretty quickly. Now, the Bible is very enthusiastic about this decision, unsurprisingly. In fact, on back-to-back pages of the Bible, spanning the end of 2 Chronicles and the beginning of Ezra, shortly after conquering Babylon and becoming the new king of everything, we're given the description of this cherished edict that gets the redemptive plan back on track and that gets the Jewish people back on track. Why can I keep bumping the microphone? The Bible's in a weird place. Just a second, I'm going to move it. Okay, 2 Chronicles 36, the last book of 2 Chronicles. It reads like this, starting in verse 22. In the first year of Cyrus... No, I don't want to start there yet. I want to back it up just a tiny bit in 2 Chronicles here to the stuff about Nebuchadnezzar. This is going to be a lot of Bible, but I'm doing it anyway. 2 Chronicles 36:15. There we go. The Lord, the God of their fathers, the Jewish people, sent word to them through his messengers again and again, because he had pity on his people and on his dwelling place. But they mocked God's messengers, despised his words, and scoffed at his prophets until the wrath of the Lord was aroused against his people, and there was no remedy. That totally reminds me of getting toward the end of the book of Matthew, where Jesus issues those withering critiques of the religious leadership. And it isn't just of the current leadership, calling out the Pharisees and Sadducees and stuff. Jesus likens them to this historical through line amongst his own people, amongst God's chosen people, where the rejection of God's prophets is not the exception, it's the rule, and the violent rejection of God's prophets. This sounds like Jesus. Jesus sounds like this. Keeping going here in 2 Chronicles. He brought up against them the king of the Babylonians, who killed their young men with the sword in the sanctuary and spared neither young man nor young woman, old man or aged. That's 586 BC, the conquest of Jerusalem at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, the destruction of the temple and the exportation at his hands. God handed all of them over to Nebuchadnezzar. He carried to Babylon all the articles from the temple of God, both large and small, and the treasures of the Lord's temple and the treasures of the king and his officials. They set fire to God's temple and broke down the wall of Jerusalem. They burned all the palaces and destroyed everything of value there. He carried into exile to Babylon the remnant who escaped from the sword, and they became servants to him and his sons until the kingdom of Persia came to power. And then here in verse 21, we get this interesting little pivot describing what was going on back in Jerusalem, back in Judea. The land enjoyed its Sabbath rests all the time of its desolation. It rested until the 70 years were completed in fulfillment of the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah. Very interesting. So the chronicler here is almost likening this time of exile to a Sabbath. Is that too extreme? He's likening it to a run-up to a year of Jubilee. Maybe neither of those are perfectly analogous, but the chronicler sees some benefit, that there's something good cooking, and that the rest, the reset that's happening back in Jerusalem while the action is moved east to Babylon, is actually of benefit. But now we get the big payoff in the final sentences of 2 Chronicles. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, the Lord moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and to put it in writing. Maybe this writing was sent out on one of those little JBL speaker, football, cylinder kind of things that we were talking about the other day. The chronicler goes on here. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any one of his people among you, may the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. And that's how this gigantic work of the Chronicles that summarizes everything from the beginning up till Cyrus's decree, that's how it ends. There you go. The opportunity's there. God has worked something out of nothing. What looked like it was intended for evil, God has intended for good. The land has rested. Everything is teed up and ready to go. Let anybody who wants to go and do this obvious good thing that God wants him to do, let them go up. It's such a positive ending to a story that up until this point at the end of 2 Chronicles, as you just work through the Old Testament, has had a lot of really disappointing, really difficult things happen in it. The bottom line is this. Cyrus is very busy. He just conquered most of the known world. He's got a lot on his plate. He's swamped. And as a reader who cares about the redemptive plan and God's chosen people, as you're reading through the Old Testament, you're just like, I hope that he'll notice our thing and care about that, because it would just take a stroke of a pen. It would just take some etching on a little message football that gets sent out to the four corners of the empire to solve everything and get stuff back on track. I just hope he'll notice in the midst of all of his busyness. And according to the chronicler, according to the author of the book of Ezra, the answer we get to that is that it was God himself who raised up Cyrus and who caused Cyrus, in the midst of all of his busyness and all of the things he needed to fret about administratively, to take notice of the plight of the Jewish people and to decide that it would be in the best interest of everything for him to let them go back and get to the business of rebuilding that temple. Next time around, we're going to talk about what Cyrus might have been thinking he was going for with all of this. And we're going to talk about how the whole enterprise plays out moving forward in the biblical narrative. And I think we're going to have a lovely time doing it. All right. I like hanging out with you. Thanks for doing it. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.